Hello everyone and welcome to our coverage for the third design diary from Paul Denon for Dune Imperium Uprising. It seems I'm now contractually obliged to cover all of these as and when they come out. I'm still waiting for my check. Now, this came out yesterday at time of recording. Funny enough, it actually got released just as I started streaming yesterday for some Dune Imperium. So if you want to see my immediate reactions, you can go ahead and look at the stream yesterday. It'd be fair, it was a pretty wild stream as well, for that matter. But now I've had a bit more time to actually look in a bit more detail and kind of give you a bit of a better idea of what is going on. And this one is talking about spies. And just spies. That is the total focus for this, so it shouldn't be a particularly long one here. We've speculated, obviously, a bit on this about what spies are going to look like in their use for Uprising. Clearly, there's a focus of trying... It's something that's been sort of kind of already being hinted at and has been touched upon already with Dune Imperium, with like infiltration, Helena's ability, cards allowing you to bypass operation, that sort of thing. But now it's being hard-baked a lot more solidly into the game's mechanics, and that's probably a good thing. Before we get started, of course, a reminder that we've got plenty going on here at Hidden Assets. A reminder that we have the upcoming tournament, the 2023 Imperium Cup, which was announced a couple weeks or so ago, and signups are still live up until the end of the month. There's a link to that in the video description below. We'd encourage everyone to join that can do. Please do so. Really want this tournament to do super well. So much so that this Saturday coming at midday UK time, I am going to be doing a 24-hour stream of Dune Imperium because I am slightly insane. But also, if anyone signs up for the tournament over that 24-hour period as I'm streaming, I will put in twice the entry fee into the prize pool out of my own back pocket. So if 100 people join, if 1,000 people join the tournament, first of all, I've got a big problem organizing the tournament. Second of all, I'm broke. But it will make for a good event nonetheless. So hopefully you guys will join on for that then. And of course, the other bits and pieces we've got going on here at the channel. So let's have ourselves a quick little dive through here. So a little bit of early information from Paul here talking about obviously how infiltration has been worked previously. It generally has been fun. It's a nice way of kind of like being able to kind of interact on a way on the board. Not just I go to this spot and that's it, it's done and dusted. You know, the ability to be able to get in after them obviously has a little bit of fun byplay. But it's always been kind of very supplementary to the game. It's not really been hard-coded in. But something we've noticed for Uprising, with stuff like the shield wall and the worms and stuff like that, is there's definitely a much more focus of trying to tie in the more thematic areas of the Dune universe into Uprising, kind of tying them into game mechanics, and this clearly is no exception. So, things are being changed. With Uprising, we want to integrate infiltration in a different way. You won't find any cards in Uprising that explicitly write out this text that you can bypass enemy agents. Instead, that is tied to spies. And this is how they work. They are their own resource in this game, and the way that spies work is reasonably simple. Although I say that, when I read this on stream, I had to reread this like 3 times because I just didn't get it at first, but it's actually not that bad. So, you, at the start of the game, you get 3 spies in your supply. They're your own tokens, so you do as you wish. Now, whenever you trigger the spy icon, which looks like this, you can place one of your 3 spies from your supply onto the board into an unoccupied observation post. And what we mean by that is if we look at this board here, just skip your head slightly, you'll see across the board that there are these symbols here now, these little eye symbols. There's one dotted here, there's one for shipping, there's ones for cities. Every single faction also has a spy spot as well. So whenever you manage to get this icon going, be it via an agent card, an intrigue, however it is, some space on the boards that you put space down, you can take a spy and put it to any one of these that is not occupied. So if someone beats you to it, you're just kind of out of luck. Now, the spies have an obvious function and a less obvious function. So the best way I'm going to show this to you is just let's do it physically on this little virtual thing I've got here. So let's say that we have got ourselves our spy token, and we find a card or ability to put our spy down. We put it down on this spot specifically. So this has access to High Council, Imperial Privilege, and Swordmaster. Note that although this allows us to do stuff in Imperial Privilege, we still must have the influence to visit there. Like always, even Kwisatz Haderach, you can't Kwisatz the spaces that you don't have access because of influence restrictions. That's no other change. So, this allows you infiltration on all three of these spaces whenever the heck you want. So, let's say, for example, a pretty obvious case would be, let's say that we've got a yellow player that makes their way over to the Swordmaster, and they get there first. Well, now you've got an infiltration, assuming you can pay the cost, which is 6 Solari now. That's something that's being confirmed. That the Swordmaster, it's 8 Solari for the first person, 6 for everyone else. Just want to throw that out there. That means that you can, as the red player, infiltrate that spot, and you can also get your Swordmaster. However, when you do infiltrate, you lose your spy there immediately. It's gone. It's had its one use. It's let you get there. That gets returned to your supply. I imagine that is just going to be the way. There might be an intrigue, maybe, that lets you do it one time and keep your thing there, optionally. I would imagine there's not going to be any cards that let you do that without interrupting, because that would be potentially be absurdly strong for factions, that sort of thing. But who really knows? Anyway, so that lets you do that. You infiltrate in, done and dusted, nice and simple. But there's actually a second use for the spies, and this is a kind of a funky one. They do give you infiltration, and if you infiltrate, you must recall the spy. That's forced. However, that doesn't stop you visiting places anyway. So I could go, say, to Imperial Privilege, for example, and I could go ahead and pay the 3 Solari with my influence and get in there and do all the good stuff. That's fine. When you visit a space that is connected to a spy, but you've not infiltrated, you can optionally recall the spy. You don't have to, but you can optionally recall it there, and when you do, you draw an extra card into your deck. So there's some interesting situations where you might like to do this, maybe with like a High Council, trying to buy a Spice Must Flow. You could see something like that, perhaps. That could be kind of useful. And it gives you some ideas that there's a little bit of flexibility going on. Again, it's optional. You don't have to. It should be noted, if you do it for infiltration reasons, then you don't get to draw the card. Your bonus was the infiltration. But it's an option that you can consider. And that's the basics of spies. Pretty straightforward. It's just about, obviously, creating these resources. There is a leader that we'll talk about a little bit later on that can obviously make them on the side. Otherwise, you're going to have to start visiting the Emperor, maybe find an intrigue to let you do that sort of thing. There are ways and means of generating these. What will be interesting, I suppose, will be seeing where they get put. I do think this spot here specifically is going to be very, very popular, and I have a feeling that's why it kind of got used for this picture, because there's obviously, once you infiltrate for your Swordmaster, it's obviously very, very strong to be able to do that. It's one of the nice things that Helena can still do in Dune Imperium, for example. While we're here as well, I just want to quickly make a side mention as well. There hasn't been a lot of discussion, admittedly, apart from a couple people, talking about High Council, and the fact that you can spend your 5 spies on a second visit to pick up some spies and this sort of stuff here. It's a great price. 5 Solari for all of this is great. I think the reason it's not being talked about a lot is that we simply don't really know how much this is actually going to be a factor. Because bear in mind, this has to be you only get this if you've already gone to High Council. And the thing is, like, these are all battle-orientated, realistically, resources. But to get these resources, you have to have gone here already with 5 cash to get something that's influence rated. And like this and this, there's not really a lot of pair between the two. So unless you're going like a hybrid build, I think maybe like a beast, for example, could make great use out of this. That would be really good. But the other issue being, of course, that this is pretty expensive. You know, if you think you're getting your Swordmaster and you're going High Council twice, and that's not counting anything else you might buy of your cash, gathering support, privilege, you know, you're going to have a lot of money to be able to do this, and sometimes those games just don't really happen. So I think this is good value, but I don't know how much actually going to see it. We'll have to wait and see. Now, I don't want to gloss over the fact that the Swordmaster has been changed, and now you've got, like, this Swordmaster tax, so that whoever goes there first pays 8, and then everyone else pays 6, and of course the fact that you can infiltrate into there as well. The truth is that this is obviously, I guess, an attempt to kind of deal with the Swordmaster rush stuff that's kind of going on at the moment, and it will definitely help with that, because it's very hard for multiple people to get to 8 really quickly, But it isn't that hard for someone to get to 8 and someone to get to 6. And if they can do it with some infiltration, then that's all well and good. And there might be some play there. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that changes games. I think what you'll find is that Uprising games, there's going to be a lot of actions very, very quickly. People are going to get those actions going, I think, most of the time. And the fact that it's cheaper means that if people do struggle with their monetary, their economy, it's just coming apart for whatever reason, at least it's less of a barrier at the Swordmaster. So I guess that's not a bad thing, but we'll have to see how this plays out in reality. But it's probably a change for the better, I would guess. So how do you generate spies? Well, let's talk about it. The main way you're going to be doing it is by visiting the Bene Gesserit and visiting this here, the espionage space. 1 spice for a card draw and a spy, which is not bad, all things considered. I think it's interesting to see something that costs 1 spice. And to be fair, this is something that has just not really been much of a thing for most of Dune Imperium. If you think about everything that you can do in the game, how many things actually cost 1 spice? Artillery tech? Esmar 2x ability? Something else I can't really think of. Calculated higher, the intrigue. That's about it, really. There is very, very few things that cost 1 spice. So the fact that there's going to be a hard-baked space that only costs 1 is nice. That gives you a chance to like go base in espionage, something like that. Maybe you're kind of doing it as a bit of a stall to pick up your Swordmaster, perhaps, something along those lines. That could be an interesting little idea. But yeah, and obviously, again, this is obviously going to help fighting for the Bene Gesserit, which I think are going to be pretty useful in this game for sure. There are, of course, other ways that you'll be able to generate it as well. For example, they're talking about the first lady here, Lady Margot Fenring. Who has Arrakis informant. So whenever you use her ring, you can put a spy on a city location, which is pretty good. Because that means, like, in like sort of the early rounds, she can definitely target a lot of combat and get a lot of rewards that way. So that's going to make her pretty dangerous. Of course, there's also going to be a few cards that you generate spy tokens as well, as you would expect. Reliable Informant is given here as an example to let you visit a spacing spot, Highliner, or the other one. And that will let you put a spy on any one of the other factions. It's fine enough. I do think, though, something like this, for example, it's pretty cheap for a good reason. This is very blockable. And I think you're going to find there's going to be a lot of fighting for factions, I think, in Uprising. I think everyone's going to think they can get different use of bits and pieces. And if someone picks up some of this early, I think people are going to be scared of the power of the spy tokens. And you might well see that starting to get blocked. So, you know, that's something to bear in mind. But, you know, I think if you can get this off, for example, your timing's good, your first to act, get that in, that can definitely help you a lot fight for a lot of factions. So that's definitely going to be good here. This also ties in to a new icon, which we had spotted in the Spy Satellites podcast I think we did. And that revolves around the eye symbol. Now, what this basically represents, pretty straightforward, is that Dangerous Rhetoric, for example, you can either use it to a council spot or any spot that you have a spy connected to. Anywhere on the board, faction, non-faction, whatever you want, you can go ahead and send cards with this icon to. This obviously can get very strong very quickly, and things that you're going to be very aware of when people start picking up these cards and watching where their spies are going. You might not be able to do very much about it, but you can try maybe to fend off whatever damage it's going to do. But this is going to be very strong. Obviously, this is not the only one. If we go down here, a few more. These ones here, Covert Operation, these 3 here, you can see, these are only spy cards as well. So, whereas this one, at least you've got an option to, like, go to maybe, like, the council. There's a few cards where you have to put something down. Strike Fleet's not so bad because this comes with a spy token. But it means that these cards are going to be situationally very strong, but you've got to plan ahead of them, which, of course, makes total sense. There are 2 good things for these cards. The first off is that they are generally going to be self-funding, in that, at least with like this one here, say you get Covert Operation, you don't have any spies going, well, obviously that's not ideal, but at least the first time you reveal it, you get to put 2 spies down. So that's good. So they will be able to typically get themselves set up. It's not a case where you're going to get hold of these cards typically. There's going to be some exceptions. But typically, if you get hold of these cards, even if you're not able to hit the Bene Gesserit or find ways to get these spies down, even revealing them just gets themselves active and in the game, which I think is a good design choice on the whole. It's not going to be very fast to do that, but it will work eventually, so that's a good thing. The other thing you'll notice as well is that some of these cards have bonuses for recalling spies. Public Spectacle gives you a bump, Strike Fleet giving you some troops. So, this has some interesting uses as well. So, of course, remember, if you use these to infiltrate a spot, you are forced to recall the spy that was connected to it. So these are going to be guaranteed off. But again, if you go to space that wasn't infiltrated, you can still optionally take it back to trigger these effects. So this is where it's going to be interesting to see some of the covert operation. He could just go ahead and put that anywhere. And might decide to keep his spy down, obviously, so places that he can keep using this card ability. But Public Spectacle Strike Fleet, you know that they're gonna have to recall their spy, surely, especially with Strike Fleet. Just using it to go to a space and nothing else is gonna feel pretty bad. You feel like you're gonna have to recall the spy to get the troops in, but then, of course, your next problem is how are you then going to then resupply the spies elsewhere to keep using that? And that's an economy issue that players are going to have to get to grips with. I think it should be interesting. I think it should be very cool to see how players try to work around that. Again, some of these are going to be better than others. But yeah, some of these, if you can get, like, say, Public Spectacle in the hand of, like, Margot, for example, those wild bumps, ooh, that's very scary indeed. So that brings us to a brand new game mechanic, and that is the option to recall spies for other reasons, and this brand new symbol that's here. These will start appearing on a few cards and intrigues, bits and pieces here, and the idea is to give the spies a bit of extra dynamic of play and a bit of unexpected benefits to your opposition or yourself, potentially. So, there are going to be some intrigues around that will allow you to recall spies off of the board to not with infiltration, but specifically for intrigue cards to get pretty decent bonuses out of them here. And you can see that some of these are going to be pretty strong here. For example, Spring the Trap, recall 2 agents on the board for +7 swords. Very good. Find weakness even. These are totally fine. So I think Spy Economy is going to be, at the very least, situationally important. And potentially important for everyone to try and get invested in. Not some games are going to differ more than others. And of course, if you start finding these sort of intrigues, you're going to have to go into like the espionage a lot more. But if you can get this set up and you get the right cards, you can be incredibly dangerous. One thing that should be noted, I'm sure you've all spotted here, is that special mission here has an optional way, obviously, to either put a spy on a city, so you can infiltrate for combat, but you can recall a spy to take out the wall. That's insane. I mean, sort of talked into Design Diary 2. We've been able to use sandworms in battles for city combat. So the fact you can just recall a spy to break that out with not even being able to go to the city means that this is a very, very dangerous card. And whoever has this in their hand knows that they have a lot of potential power to alter the way the game is going to go. So that's very, very scary. And that's about it, really, for this update. You know, fairly short and concise, but a lot of important information in there. It's another thing that players are going to have to rumble with, and again, it depends a lot on who the leader you take, the kind of cards that you draw, what's in the Imperium row, as to how heavily you dive into this. But I do reckon, like, if you can get this up and running, you can have a heck of a lot of fun, you know, setting up spies, infiltrating areas, kind of playing the board state as you go. I think this could be potentially a really, really fun way to play. How effective it's going to be, that's a little bit hard to know potentially, but I think there's a lot of fun to be had, and it should prove to make the world a lot much more diverse. And I think that is the byword for Uprising. Uprising, the attempt to make the board you're playing on a significantly more diverse place to play, rather than just kind of the same sort of moves and paths, you know, stuff like this. Like, it's really hard to go into a game expecting certain things. It's going to be very kind of play it by ear, work it out as you go, which is going to be a bit of a change for some people, I suppose, and having to kind of like react to situations a lot more, which to me, I think Dune Imperium has always been. It's a game of opportunism and reacting to the circumstances in front of you. And I do feel like as the expansions have gone on, that has been slightly lost to the sands of time. You know, once shipping came in, everyone goes shipping. Once Immortality came in, you know, you don't have to worry about the Imperium row going dry. You just nuke it and start again, basically. So I personally am happy to see that this kind of fort is going back into the game. Obviously, you could decide to use the expansions on the side, and that's your decision. I'm just talking about Uprising on its own as a core package, and I think players are going to have to think on their feet a heck of a lot more. Kind of a bit like the good old days, in a way. So I'm much looking forward to that. Last little tidbits here. There's mention of the Imperial Spy Master and the individual behind who I believe is meant to be the Imperial Spy from the original game. That's what I've seen people say. I legitimately don't know, but that's what I've seen, so there you go. There's not much... Well, there's not... I would say there's not much left for us to dive into. That's not exactly true. We still don't know very much about the leaders in this game. We've only seen one. I assume we'll see a little bit more about that going into time. The other big mechanic that we simply have not much of an idea at the moment is contracts. And the whole kind of modularity that Paul Denon wants to get into Uprising. And to be at this moment, we don't really know anything about it, so I very much suspect that that will be the next design diary coming. And whenever it does come, I'll be here to cover it and give you my thoughts. So have a good weekend, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and yeah, of any luck, I'll see you guys Saturday for the 24-hour stream, because, yeah, someone thought that was a good idea. Bye!